Well, hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Status Checks with Chaplain Pat. Just a quick 5-minute video with no frills or gimmicks, with tips and tools to help you maintain your emotional sanity as a first responder. If you've been in any of my classes or if you've heard me speak, then you've heard me use this phrase. It's okay not to be okay. I've been saying this for a number of years now, and in fact, I'm going to go as far as to say that I coined that phrase, and that it was stolen from me by the mental health professionals and the media. All right, now, I'm laughing at myself just like you're laughing at me. But in all seriousness, I've been using that phrase for a long time. But not being okay is not the subject of today's status check video. No. Today, what I want to talk to you about is that it's okay to be okay. All right, let's talk about trauma for just a second. As first responders, whether it's in law enforcement, fire, or dispatch, we are immersed in society's trauma. Why? Because nobody ever calls 911 for a good thing. Something's going on in their world that's bad. And they have done what society has taught them to do, and that's to call 911. So then we show up on the scene to solve whatever problem they're facing. Sometimes that problem is very simple. Sometimes it's extremely sad and complex. But trauma is trauma no matter how extreme or simple it may seem. To believe that you can operate in the world of first response without being impacted by the trauma that we experience in some way is like saying that you can jump into a swimming pool and not get wet. Anyone who enters the sphere of trauma will always carry a piece of that with them. It's just what it is. That's trauma. So with this understanding, we're seeing a shift, a pendulum swing, if you could say, from you can't ask for help, you can't show that you've been impacted by something you've seen or experienced because that would be a sign of weakness. And now we're swinging to this other side where there's this feeling or sense that there's almost an expectation that you're not going to be okay after experiencing a difficult trauma. That if you're a first responder, you're going to have PTSD, be addicted to something, contemplating suicide, and be on your 6th marriage by the time you've got 15 years in. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating just a little bit, but you know what I'm talking about because over the past year or so, a funny question has been coming up out of conversations that I've been having. What's wrong with me? Now, on first glance, let me tell you, that's a loaded question. What's wrong with you? Let me count the ways. We have been talking so much about the impacts of trauma involvement, and you've heard me say countless of times that it's okay not to be okay. And then you've just returned from a pretty horrific incident, and you're okay. You don't feel emotionally overwhelmed. You don't feel sad. In fact, you feel normal, like you do when you come back from a simple call of help, I've fallen and I can't get up kind of a thing. But if the expectation is that I should be feeling the emotional overwhelming impacts of that trauma, and I don't, then it leads me to this question. What's wrong with me? And the answer is nothing. Why? Because as much as it is okay not to be okay, it is okay to be okay. Seriously, it's okay to be okay. You see, it's all about how we view or perceive the trauma that we're experiencing. Because trauma is in the eye of the beholder. You've all heard that statement, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. Well, so is trauma. How trauma impacts you is going to be completely different than how trauma impacts somebody else. So, and this is vital, never judge your response or non-response based on somebody else's response or non-response. Two people can experience the same trauma and be affected in two completely different ways. How you view it and how it impacts you is you, and you have to do you. This is why we consider a pretty bad call a potentially traumatic event, meaning that there's a potential that the trauma could have an acute emotional impact on your world. But it doesn't mean it has to. Sometimes it doesn't. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that you're heartless, you can't feel anything, or it simply means that you're okay. And it is okay to be okay. So, if you ask me, do I think you're crazy and if something's wrong with you? Well, my answer will always be, of course there is. We're all a little bit crazy to do the jobs we do. But in all reality, the answer is no. Because as much as it's okay not to be okay, it's okay to be okay. But, and it's a big one with all caps, when I say it's okay not to be okay, the rest of that statement says, as long as you're doing something about it. My wife is pretty smart. She's reminded me that doing nothing is doing something. It just doesn't end well. It's okay not to be okay as long as you're doing something about not being okay. And, in all caps, it's okay to be okay as long as you're doing something about it. What? That doesn't make sense, you say. Well, it does, because emotional balance doesn't come when you wait to do self-care only after you're not okay. You have to be purposeful in doing self-care even when you're okay. Purposeful emotional self-care needs to happen on a regular basis. You work out to stay in shape, and you work out to get in shape. your emotional conditioning works exactly the same way. All right, until next time, I wish you all the best. Remember to be purposeful and taking care of you, and it's okay to be okay. See y'all later.